Okay. So I thought this was an interesting chapter with Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did you watch the video?
No, I didn't have a chance to watch that yet.
It was really interesting. Like the first half of the video, you're like, wow, Brazil really has their crap together. They don't look at each other's race. Everybody commingled. It was, they were better with slavery. Blah 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 blah. Well, then the second half of the video continues, and he goes to a different town, and it's like, no, the poor are still poor, the black are still black. They try to whiten themselves by intermarrying, and really they get whiter with more money. It doesn't matter what color their skin is, it depends on how much money they have. And it was interesting. The government would like you to think that they're a and they're a racial democracy. They don't really see skin color,
Mm-hmm.
but they still see social class, and that's all money, you know or there's like one thing that's like purging your blood, and that just means you marry like somebody who's whiter, so you're
Right.
purging, you're making your blood less dark. So it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, I found that
So
interesting too. How they said that they would try to make them more white to
yeah, whiten.
basically brighten up, and then they can move up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. Now there was a lot less, there was more intermarriages and
Mm-hmm.
open intermarriages than with the African slaves, than there were with the African slaves in Brazil, than there were the African slaves in America.
Correct.
It was just more acceptable with the Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was also, they had the whole sugar cane like need, and so they brought over the slaves to help with the sugar cane, but there was also an abundance. It was closer, it was closer to get them than it was to bring them to the U.S., and there was more of them. So
Right.
guard one and just bring in another. So it was interesting. So let's see. They have a large multiracial population. The United States has been experiencing growth in their multiracial population over the last several decades. And then there was an article um, that just all talked about multiracial in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, because of Brazil's highly diverse system, they have a very complicated racial classification system. What do you think the racial classification system will look like in the United States in 50 years? So that's page 451. So I guess I have to look at that because I don't remember it now. I'm on to
Yeah, from remembering that it was basically the way that they line item each person. Does like the skin color and then where they're at. It had like, I think if I remember correctly, it had like a bazillion different ones. How it listed, like it lists down the line of the different names and the different thing. It's very, how you get classified and which one and how you move. And I mean,
yeah,
I,
you're
I guess
black, you're brown, you're darker during carnival, you're
right.
like, really? Okay.
I mean, I guess what do we think the racial classification will look like in the U.S.? I mean, in all honesty, I don't think it's going to change much. I think
I don't
we're,
think so
I
at
don't think
all.
it'll get that minute where we're going to have the differentiation of you got the black and then you got the watered down black and then you got the brown and then you got in between brown and then I don't think we're going to have as nearly as complex of a system. I mean, that seems great, but I just think way too much has to happen to get to that system that it's not going to be as easy of a transition. So I guess, I mean, maybe I guess the differentiation would be a little bit, you know, I don't know. I think it's still going to be the same. It's a hard question. I'm like, I hate these ones because it's like, I don't know. How am I supposed to answer? I mean, I guess looking at the trend, I mean, at least it seems people would be a little more tolerated, but I still think there will still be a clear distinction because no matter what system you're in, it's still always going to be there. You're going to have white, you're going to have black, and you're going to have, you know, the brown and then the Asian. It's always going to be there. The color is there, so I guess they'll kind of keep it, but I don't think it'll be maybe as severe. You know, we've done away from slavery, so I would hope the progression gets better, that it's not as, hey, you're stuck here, but I don't know if it's going to change that much.
I don't think it is changing. I think people still look at it as you're either black or you're white, or you're brown and you're white. I don't think that they'll have a different classification system where they're going to say, you know, you're this white or you're that white, or, you know, because they have, you know, black has black shiny skin, kinky woolly hair, thick lips. The Cabo has generally lighter skin with hair growing somewhat longer. The Cabo Verde is slightly lighter. The Oscuro is simply a dark man. The mulatto is a category divided into two types. Very light skin. I don't think that we in the U.S. will ever break it down by so many different categories. I think that we'll have, you know, black, white, and Hispanic, even in 50 years, because in the last 200 years it hasn't changed between black and white. So I don't see it in the next 50.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think the same thing. I just think it's too complex. There's too many categories. There's too many classifications to be like, it made my head spin. I'm like, really? How am I supposed to figure out who's where and belongs to which one? And I mean, I guess their system makes sense, but how do you keep track of it?
Right. The interesting element in Brazil's racial system is that people can be viewed as different races within the course of their lifetime, particularly if they have changed their social class. Race is seen as both an achieved and an ascribed status. Do you think that race in America has the potential to be this type of system? Why or why not? Again, when you're saying it as race, I don't think that we're going to change what we define race as. And race is defined as the color of the skin. It's not defined as how much money you have, right?
Right.
And I don't think, you know, and it's such stereotyping, and I hate to say this, but like when you look at, you know, the majority of professional athletes in this country are black. Football players, baseball players, basketball players who make a ton of money, and they're still considered black.
Mm-hmm.
They're not whiter because they have, you know, LeBron James is no whiter because he's got bajillions of dollars.
True.
So I just don't think we look at it that way. We don't attach money to race. Race is race to us. We don't change that because of how much we have. I don't think that that's going to change.
Right. Yeah, I think you have some good points though too, and I agree with those as well. That, you know, race is an achieved or an ascribed status. I mean, we already have our races already ascribed to us. I mean, you're born, and like I said, you know, use the sports stars, and especially like LeBron James. I mean, I'm sure he would be offended if he was called white. You know, oh, you're up in that category. It's like, no, I want to still maintain my status of, hey, I'm a successful black person. And so I think here our race, because, you know, in Brazil, it seems in their system they move up. The whiter they become, that they try to become white and white out or something is what they were saying. The more white they become, the more they move up, and they're able to move up, and then they're seen as such. But here, I don't think we'll have a system where, hey, you're not viewed as being black anymore. You know, I think with our ideology, our entire background makeup, I see that's going to be really hard to change that. I mean, maybe not in our lifetime or in the next 100 years. I'm sure the world will end by then. For it to really make that profound of a change, where I would think they would have to overpopulate in a sense. There would have to be so many blacks having kids that it overpopulates it. Where then, okay, if they're intermarrying, okay, now it's mixed, so it does water it down. Then I guess you could say, okay, they're not really seen as black. They are white. I mean, I have a couple of friends that, their parents, one's black, one's white, and you can tell at times, but it's like, their skin's a little bit darker, but it's not full on. Like if you look at their mom, it's like she's dark, but them it's watered down a little bit. And so I guess in that sense you could say, well, you would reference that, hey, it's not, but it's still not that they're going to achieve it because of it. Their skin, their race is still, that's what they are. That's not changing. So I think
Right.
that's, I guess I'm trying to explain it in a way that it, makes sense, that I don't see it to change, because no matter what status they are, they're still going to be that race. It's not going to change. We might treat them differently, but they'll still be identified as that by that race. That's just how our system is. And
I think they become entitled. They
Mhm.
become entitled to something, but they become entitled to something because of their money. I don't think that they become entitled because they're being perceived as
More white.
white.
Exactly.
So,
And I don't think they're even worried about moving up in the, hey, I was black and now I'm less black category. I mean, I guess, I've heard from some people that, when blacks, as they become successful, they're like, oh, you're turning your back on us, you're becoming white. I guess that's the only argument I would hear is, that
right.
some, because, hey, well, now you're educated, you think you're better than us. But that would be the only way I would think that maybe that, okay, they're not viewed exactly the same, because, oh, well, you live in the better neighborhood, you make more money than us, and so, you turned your back on us. It's like, why? Because I decided to get out of that lifestyle and get an education
Right.
and better myself, so I didn't have to be living on the street and begging anymore. I mean,
Well,
that's
and she talked a little bit about, Obama and people saying, he wasn't black enough, or he wasn't white enough. Like, he was kind of in that middle because he was a educated, well-spoken human being. So,
right.
But I think you're right, though. I think it's from what I've seen personally, I think it's the black community are the ones that put more pressure on successful black people than the white community saying, "Oh, I don't want you to be successful."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but that's that again, personally, that's what I've seen. That's
Right. No, and I think it is. I think they do. I mean, part of the paper I'm writing is about, intermarriage between blacks and whites. And one of the things I've seen is education is a main contributor, and even the prejudice and, I guess trying to find the word, against the resentment or the standing notion that the black women have is, how dare a black man goes outside. They get more, like, grief on their side than they do from the whites. That it's like, oh, hey, whatever, whites don't care that they are, but it's the black women are really having an issue, and they're the ones that make it the most difficult, because, and I know she talked about it, and I think in one of the study groups, that it's, there's a lot less black men to choose from. So the women are like, hey, there's a decent guy, and now you're going over and marrying the white person, there's less for us. But I think that contributes to, their culture. They want theirs to stay, instead of, oh, you got educated, you left. But because now the new association, it's like, well, why would I want to hang out with you when you guys are a bunch of lazy people? Like, these people are striving for something in life. You kind of surround yourself around people that do like things. So I think, yeah, that definitely would be a factor of, it's not going to change. Race is, you're still that color,
right.
and your own race kind of gives you more grief for it.
Yeah, I think, and I think that that's just the answer for everything here, is that here in the U.S., race is race. Race is defined in color. So it doesn't matter about anything else.
Right.
where they're defining it differently in Brazil. Now, my niece, her second husband is a black man.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a son, and his first wife was white too, so his children are biracial. So when they first started dating and first got married, my nephew had not a hard time. He had a little bit of a hard time with it, but that's because his father had a hard time with it, and his grandmother, his father's mother. But he used to say all the time, like, when we go out as a family, Norm's kids look like they could be your kids because but they look at me and they know I'm not Norm's kid. So it's that kind of a thing, because he's looks more like his dad. He's whiter than white, where both of his, Norm's children are both like a light brown color, So that used to bother him. It was like, when we go out as a family, I stick out like I don't belong in the family because Dominique and Norman could be yours. Nobody knows if you're their mother, but everybody knows he's not my father. So it was an interesting, it was an interesting thing that he needed to work through, as a 14-year-old boy, right?
Right.
Did you look at that website at all?
I tried to, and I don't know if it's blocked on mine.
Yeah, it was weird. I tried to do it on a different computer at work yesterday, and it wouldn't let me in, but now today it did.
Yeah, it let me in, and I'm on the page, and it does have the National Geographic. It has one little magazine, small picture in the corner, but you can't even see half of anything. And if you click to the next one, it just goes to like another issue. So I'm like, what picture am I supposed to? It's a guy climbing a rock wall. Okay. Like, I don't know.
Let me, I'm going to just, let me share my screen and we can, let's say, it's like there's that one. Do you see the two women?
No, I don't have that one, but I can see it on yours.
There's that. Oh, what happened? Yeah, this should have been so much easier to do, and I don't know why they couldn't just put up pictures, because it made it more difficult.
Was there a certain issue that we're looking at? Is it black and white? Is that what the...
No, I think it was the changing the face of America. I don't know if that was the article. Let's see.
Did it say when the issue was? What month was it from?
I don't think it did, because all it said was just to click here kind of thing. So I clicked there and go out of there and let me go into it again and see if it'll. Yeah, see, so frustrating. just can't win.
Oh, for sure. All the nuances of it. That's what gets me. Okay, so now
all right, so yeah, so it was this photo issue one.
Okay, so that was the one then. So
yeah.
I guess you have to click on. Okay, that's the page I had, and I'm like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
I guess click on it. Okay. It's always weird when you're trying to use a computer. I'm using the one at my parents, and I don't know what I'm doing. All right, so click on that, the photograph issue. Do you click on it, or?
Yeah, you click on the first. Let me see where it is.
Does it go?
How weird, because I had it before, right? And now it's not coming up the way.
Yeah, because it opened, but
It's relate changing the face of America.
and it's all possible that my parents have got all their Norton program, and I don't use that stuff, so I don't. Maybe it's blocking some parts of it. I don't know.
Yeah. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, I can see yours.
Okay. So there's that. Then there's. I show you that one. So you're just supposed to be I guess we're supposed to be looking at these pictures, right?
Okay.
And then you see down at the bottom, it kind of tells you what they identify as, but like this woman here, like she's got very light eyes. So to me, she's someone who's a mixed race, right? Where the boy next to her, looking at him, I would say he was black. But if you look down,
But his eyes to me, I can't tell because usually they're kind of like brown. Most often they don't. I mean, from what I've been told, they don't usually have different color. It's usually rare.
Right.
If they have different than like dark eyes. And what is he? Right. What does he identify as?
He self-identifies as African American and German multiracial, but in a census box, it's checked as black. Self-identifies as biracial human being. Census box checked as black. And then the woman below her is self-identifies as African American, Native American, white, and Jewish, but census box checked is black. And then this young girl here, it self-identifies as Black and Asian, Korean, and African American. Census box checked is black. So I mean, so if you look at these those four people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all, when they're checking the census box, they're all black. But like this young girl, to me, I would identify her as Asian.
Yes.
And then if you go over to like this girl here,
she looks kind of like a mix of Asian and white.
Yeah. She self-identifies as Filipino, Chinese, Spanish, Indian, Hungarian, and German Jew.
Yeesh. Got enough to list.
Right. But the census box checked is white, Asian, Indian, Chinese, Filipino. And then Jewish and Imperial Eskimo. Census block checked is Alaskan Native.
Interesting.
I don't know if I would. I guess you know what I mean. If you do look at him, he does look like a Alaskan to me.
Yeah, he's got a little different.
Yeah.
Different mix, but.
And then this guy here, Japanese, Jewish, and Ukrainian. And
I would have thought Japanese, but I did see something different, but it kind of is hard to place.
Right. Yeah. And census box checked is white Japanese. And then for her, who's just a beautiful young girl.
Looks like a little white girl.
Yeah. Well, parents ID her as Korean and Hispanic. And then census, has not yet been accounted for in the census. So.
She's not old enough to identify herself as something.
Yeah. Or last time we did a census, she wasn't alive. She's only 3. So we'll get her on the next one, I guess. so that's, so that's what that is. So I think the Alaskan is probably the only one I got right. So that's just
Answer this, not correct. It's hard to tell.
yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, are we going off of looks or what they identified as? You know, it's like anybody can identify
Right.
themselves as whatever. Long-term consequences for America having a large population with racial. I don't even know if on this last one, if that, what do you think are the long-term consequences for America having a large population where their racial background is not easily identifiable based on their looks? Well, I mean, is the one in Brazil easy identifiable? I mean, theirs seems a little confusing to me too.
Yeah. So what do you think are the long-term consequences for America of having a large population with a racial background is not easily identifiable based on their looks?
I guess a long-term consequence is because we lump them together, specifically like the Asians. That one really stood out to me because how many different groups are in there and in background. Some were wealthy, some weren't, some were from very poor countries, some were able to speak English, some weren't. And it overlooks the rest. We had the model minority where some of the Asians were really, really smart, so everybody else thinks the others should be, but some of them aren't. And so I think that kind of it overlooks them, that it's just, well, you're Asian. And so it's too general, in my opinion, on that, because then you really don't see what's going on. I guess, you could say the same thing with the blacks. It's like, okay, well, they're black. Well, what does that mean? Are they African American? Are they Americans? Were they born here? Are they literally from Africa? Did they immigrate? And so I guess maybe that would be a long term, that the differentiation of really understanding who these people are, because then we lead to stereotypes, we lead to, the wrong classifications. You've got white. I mean, I don't know if you really need to dissect white, because whether you're Italian, you're German, you're Irish, you're English or whatever, I mean, for the most part, nowadays it's like we're all blended together pretty darn well. So you can't really tell the third generation in. Does that really matter that we need to break it down? Well, you used to be Irish. Well, you used to be, from Italian. But does that really matter? Because they've assimilated fairly well in the system, as it was saying, the Italians have basically made it. Does that matter? Do we need to know? Because someone like you or me later on, it's like, well, I don't identify with that culture. I don't identify with the ethnic background. I'm just American. I just do what everybody else does around here, and I don't see a difference for myself. So in that sense, does it matter that I'm broken down? Because if somebody sees me, they're going to think I'm white. Do I need a classification? I don't think we do, because you're white, you're white, you're white. I mean, it doesn't matter. But with the different minority groups, I think it would be, especially like the Hispanics, you got the Latino, you've got them from South America, you've got, North America still, with Mexico. They come from different regions, Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans. They want to know where you came from. So I guess you kind of would self-generalize, I guess. So they're just lumped together.
Right.
And then you don't really know the differences. You can't provide programs to say, here's where they're struggling. Here's the problems. Versus Asians, hey, here we go. They're all lumped together. But the majority of them struggle.
And we talked about that, right? Like we say Asian, but there's Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Pacific Islander, Indian, right? So we say Asian, or we say, oh, they're Hispanic, but they can be from Mexico or the Dominican or Colombia or Ecuador or Brazil or whatever it is that they're coming from. So we would need to broaden our categories, I think, to incorporate more people.
Mm-hmm.
So. I had looked at this, looked at these questions and stuff before, and I thought they were, again, they're just our opinion, so I guess I can
Right.
I can have, right? I'm still entitled to that, but just have to like work on my paper that I'm not doing such a good job on.
I looked at it, and if you add it all up, it almost seems like, because it says it's 150 points,
All right.
and so half of that already comes from the rough draft, the peer review, the annotated bibliography, all those other things. So it kind of already gives us like halfway.
Right.
So I'm like, well, if you already have a decent grade in the class, it's like,
Yeah.
even if you do half of an effort, I mean, even if you failed it, it still can't drastically change your grade, because